The first part of page 1 is general data. This not only includes the student's name, what grade level they are enrolled, at which school, but it also tells us their birth date, country of birth, and their status. R means refugee, M for migrant, I for immigrant, and then the last block is for greater than 3 years immigrant. This information is important to let us know if they are accountable for state testing. If a student is with us for less than 180 days, they are not accountable for testing. They are considered a newcomer, and the emphasis is on language development. Language spoken in home and additional languages helps us to make sure that we have the right interpreters ordered, and also for home school communication. The second part of this page, LEP input data, is what central office uses when they are putting the data into IC. This needs to be accurate because it is pulled by the state for funding allocations. It's also interesting to see how long they have been in the system and when they joined Boone County Schools. The yellow arrow indicates additional information on a student. If interrupted schooling is checked, you will need to speak with the EL teacher or guidance counselor to find out if there is a gap in learning or if the student has missed schooling for another social reason. Other is a useful area to indicate if the student is dual identified. If they have an IEP, this will be filled out here. The green arrow talks about students participating in spring testing. They do not mention here about the 180 days. So again, if a student is with us for less than 180 days, they will not participate in all of the statewide assessments. The brown arrow points to the section that talks about how a student can exit being identified as ELL. Tier B or Tier C tests are the only way for them to exit. Also, kindergartners cannot exit this test. The purpose of accommodations both inside the classroom and during testing is to assist the student to produce knowledge of the content without language being a barrier. That is why the wording points out that these are to be faded out as the student gains skill, knowledge, and strategies. So you should see fewer and fewer accommodations each year that the student is enrolled in ELL. This also points out the accountability for teachers that they are to be using these accommodations on an ongoing basis in the classroom throughout the school year so that they can be used for testing. The next two columns in that same section talks about the type of program that the student will receive service in. Boone County Schools does not have bilingual education programs. However, we do have bilingual staff and para-educators who do service the students sometimes in their home language. This is not, however, a requirement of being an EL teacher or para. This is a benefit or a bonus. The coral arrow points to sheltered English instruction, and this is selected for students even if parent or guardian has declined services. Due to the Office of Civil Rights, we have to ensure that students are receiving a sheltered instruction. That's why PSYOP training was so heavily reinforced in Boone County Schools. A typical selection would be structured English immersion push-in, where the teachers come into the classrooms to provide support, or pull-out ESL resource. If you do see parent guardian has declined services in the last block, the student still has to take the access test until they exit with the score of a 5. However, the parent has the right and the guardian has the right to decline services. That does not mean we do not provide support for the student in the classroom as needed. However, they cannot be pulled from the classroom. As the access test is an annual assessment, this is a wonderful tool for us to see growth in the student. Regardless of the grade cluster, if we look at the scaled score highlighted in pink, those are comparable year to year. The proficiency level, however, is a tabulated number that is not comparable. So even though the student showed growth from a 3.6 in 2012 to a 3.7 in 2013, we cannot compare those two scores. We can, however, compare the scaled score in listening from 336 in 2012 to 350 in 2013, thereby showing a growth for that student in the domain of listening. Access testing is one point of data that allows us to provide appropriate accommodations for the students within the classroom and for testing. We also see across the domains of listening, speaking, reading, and writing where an area of weakness for that student might be. And if you look on this student's data for 2014, the reading score dropped to a 2.1 proficiency level. This might be an area of concern for reading comprehension. If you look across at the comprehension score, which is taken into account with listening and reading combined, a 2.5 is much lower than a 3.2 from the previous year. However, the scaled score is just a 10-point difference. The tier level again provides important information for the EL teacher, as the student can only exit if they are taking a Tier B or Tier C level test. Typically, newcomers are the only ones who are given a Tier A access test. To exit ELL programs, students need to have an overall score, proficiency level of 5.0 or more, and a literacy score of 4.0 or more. Those are the two teal highlighted scores. The next section is testing information. This tells us a few things. If you look at the blue arrow, it will show a WAPT date. That is the WIDA test for access placement. That is the first test that they will take once they've entered a WIDA state. We are part of the WIDA consortium. This gives us a basic skill level in listening, reading, speaking, and writing, and also an overall composite. If the student enters in kindergarten or the first semester of first grade, they will receive the kindergarten WAPT. This is a basic test that gives us a starting point to provide services. Then in January of every year they will take the access test, which is in the 4 domains highlighted in yellow: listening, speaking, reading, and writing. According to federal requirements, we have 30 days from the start of school to notify all parents of the placement of their students in the EL program. Once school has started, there is a 2-week window for the same notification. Even if signatures cannot be obtained from families, services can begin as long as the notification letters have been sent. PSPs should not be developed by one single person, as they only have a snapshot of the ability and goals of the students. Page 2 starts with a table of can-dos. These are called can-do descriptors. For each domain, listening, speaking, reading, and writing, students are highlighted in the area of where they fall based on their access test scores for the grade level. A student scoring in a level 1 is entering, usually a newcomer. Level 2 is considered emerging in language development. Level 3 is developing. Level 4 is expanding. And level 5 is bridging, as this is the level where they are considered proficient or almost proficient. The student's listening score at the level 3 developing is highlighted in the middle. This allows a teacher to understand what the student is able to do at their current ability level in language development. So this student, in the area of listening, is able to categorize content-based examples from oral directions, match main ideas, use learning strategies described orally, and so on. This by no means is the lower level expectation for the student. It is a great starting point for providing in-class strategies. This is the biggest section of the PSP for instructional accommodations. It might look like most of these items are best practices, and they are. However, some of them are very specific to language development. If you look at the bottom of the second column, you will see scaffolding responses, both oral and written. If a student is typically lower in their listening or writing domains, you will see this one checked. Some are very specific to a student being dual identified, for example, assistive technology or scribing. And readers are very rarely provided unless the student is a newcomer. As the goal in providing EL services is to scaffold the amount of accommodations and assistance and support we give a student, we might need to revisit this section mid-year. Some students might be getting too much help, as their ability level has grown significantly since their last test in January, and it has taken some time for us to get to know them as students and as learners. However, the adverse might happen. We might need to provide more assistance for the student. This is a working document and can be visited any time throughout the year. It's not like an IEP where you can only visit it during ARC meetings. As a district, we are working to provide consistency with which types of support we provide for students based on their ability level in language. However, in the meantime, we are assigning appropriate accommodations as a team collaborative effort to serve the needs of the student. While it is important to point out these instructional accommodations are specifically for EL students, most of these are best practices for the classroom. If, however, it is unclear what a particular accommodation would look like in the classroom, please ask us for our input, for us to model or demonstrate, or to provide you support in your lesson planning. The final section of the PSP includes assessment accommodations for state testing. Some of these look identical to the instructional accommodations, and that is because if it is not consistently used as an accommodation in the classroom all year long, they cannot be used during state testing. Specific training on how to use these accommodations for testing is provided through the Building Assessment Coordinator. However, if you have questions, please ask your EL teacher.